absolutely love Sparks. I thought it was such a unique and bold movie. It was honestly so beautiful. How did the concept come to you, and what inspired you to make this story?
That's a good question. There are kind of a few parts that collided around the time that I started developing the film with my producer Lola, who is one of my close friends from college. I'd had an image of a body of water that has time travel power since I was pretty young, maybe 12 or 13, and I'd been toying with how to use the idea and how to use the image. So when Lola brought me to Northwestern Nevada on a research project that had nothing to do with any film development, we found this reservoir that ended up being the place where um, Sparks is partly set. I told her about the idea that I had had about this time travel magical water thing. And we were like, okay, let's actually transplant it to this place that we've just visited. And I had also kind of been thinking about how to approach filmmaking as kind of like a container for experience and for recent life. So it felt pretty natural to focus on adolescence and on teendom. I've been waiting to kind of collect memories and experiences and observations that I'd had from that period and from high school and from, summers spent kind of just like hanging about and meandering. Um, and I really, really, really liked the idea of a movie about time travel that has barely any actual time travel in it. I'm very intrigued and curious about how the prospect of an adventure, the prospect of some magical condition can change the way you live, even if it never materializes. I feel like, like Bridge to Terabithia was a movie that I loved when I was younger. And at the time that I watched it, I was really upset that we didn't see Terabithia until the very end of the film. But now I am so attached to imagination and kind of force of will as it relates to things that might not necessarily have anything to do um, with the magic at hand.
The script was so interesting, and I just loved the way you addressed so many different topics. What were like some of the themes that you really wanted to communicate through this movie?
It's a good question. I mean, I think one of the main things that I wanted to get at was desire and feelings of either platonic or sexual friendship and how I think I have faith in a lot of young people to be pretty cognizant of what their desires are while also feeling maybe vulnerable or scared to articulate them. I think what's unique about this friend group is how, and maybe a little fantastical, it's not like I had so many queer friends in high school. So it's maybe a little bit of a romanticization slash, fantastical rendering of that type of friend group, but just the idea that um, everyone's kind of matter of fact about their sexuality and doesn't necessarily need to announce it. I don't think anyone ever says the word gay in the movie. Everyone just kind of is. Five of the seven characters are queer in some way. So definitely getting at that was a big priority. And then also just this feeling of presentness and this feeling that um, life really does go on all the time, no matter kind of what obstacles are placed in your way. And I think these characters really experience that in a super high stakes. They believe the obstacles that they encounter to be high stakes, especially when, spoiler alert, Cleo goes missing. And yet still, so much adventure happens in her absence. And I think some of the most important sentiments and pieces of wisdom are imparted in the time that she's gone. The reservoir kind of barbecue scene with the gay men from San Francisco, which actually was like the first scene I ever wrote for the script. It always felt when we were on set, we called it Spark Center, just because it was kind of like in some ways the emotional heart of the movie. Just because those guys, they talk about you shouldn't necessarily romanticize the past. If you want to time travel to the 70s, then you get this like horrific period of gay and queer history right after that. So it's easy to discount parts of history that don't necessarily align with your idea of something like the 70s, like the Summer of Love, like all these periods that feel really amazing in retrospect and nostalgic. Like it's easier, or it's worthwhile to imagine how despite everything that's happening, despite the fear about the future, it's a pretty good thing and a pretty important thing to stay present and to stay hopeful.
The cast of this movie is it's a great ensemble piece. There's so many amazing people in this project. I was wondering, how did the casting come about? How did you find everyone?
So we didn't have a casting director. We have a lot of friends who are in the theater world in New York. I think everyone except for Denny, who plays Max, is New York based. And at the time, even Denny was spending a little stint in New York. I basically was just like, and I think that was the other element of thinking about how to make a movie that was really possible and realizable in the near term. So to that, like, I think if we had had a lot of older roles, it would have been impossible not to use a casting director. But because it's a bunch of teenagers who are around our age, we were like, oh, we know actors who are amazing who can tackle these roles. So we just went to a bunch of friends who either like work off Broadway or work in the comedy space, or went to college with us. My friend Miles introduced me to Elsie, and my friend Christian introduced me to Charlie, and my friend Dylan introduced me to Danny. So it was just like basically an extended word of mouth kind of operation.
One thing I loved about this movie is just how beautiful it is. You set up all the shots, like you framed it so beautifully, and you made Sparks Nevada look so dreamy. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your process and like finding the perfect shots.
Yeah, so I worked really closely with my DP, who's also my best friend from high school. His name's Keldon. And we had a lot of kind of either mid-century or like late, early-ish second half of the 20th century as like cinematic reference points. So we looked at like The Misfits, the John Huston film, and Last Picture Show. I know those are both black and white, but still compositionally are so kind of poised and detailed. Westerns, The Searchers, just because the landscape is similar. And then we really were planning it from kind of like we shot in October of 2024. We were probably mapping out a shot list in March or April, just because Keldon signed on early. And yeah, on the ground, it was kind of just a matter of like always looking for. I mean, Lola and I also did locations. Lola, my producer, we did locations ourselves. So we were like determined to find settings that already lent themselves and already had kind of built-in beauty, which is, one of the reasons that the movie theater sequence in San Francisco is actually split across three locations. The exterior is in San Francisco, the interior is in Oakland, and then the bathroom is at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art.
They're cool.
Um, yeah, we were hungry for beauty everywhere we could find it, and we were not going to let any shot go unwasted. Just because we also were, shooting, we were pretty undercovered. We did not have a lot of coverage, and so there were not a lot of takes of any shot, and we didn't probably in most scenes we had no more than two angles. Many we had only one. A lot of them were oneers. So yeah, we just wanted to maximize with every frame that we had.
I think you were very successful at that. The main character is obsessed with Paris and 1960s cinema. What
Mhm.
like influence has this time frame of film kind of influenced your artistic journey?
Everyone loves new wave cinema and loves the idea of it and maybe doesn't understand it so well just because, there are as many pretty impenetrable films as there are, more accessible, popular ones in the new wave kind of canon. Um, and Godard is kind of known critically as like not the father, but a huge innovator in um, in 20th century filmmaking and late in the back half of the 20th century. So I think it made sense to kind of be like, oh, he's so important, so no wonder our main character is taken with him, even if she doesn't quite know what it is that she likes about him. She's kind of determined to pick an interest and stick with it. And that's made even more explicit and kind of comical by the fact that, this book about this guy is presented in front of her without even her prior knowledge of him. So it's not only the fact that I admire and idolize Godard, even though I do. And then in terms of stylistic choices, and I don't know that Sparks is really a new wave movie in sensibility or in editing or in composition. I wouldn't say it is that, but just the freewheeling nature of Godard's work. I mean, I know there are so many other new wave filmmakers, but I think he's the only one that I've really like delved into deeply enough to be able to feel confident talking about. The kind of spasmodic flights of fancy and his really uncanny ability to like inject politics and kind of like declarations of intent into movies that are still narrative, you know, he's good at making clear all of his ideas and making them explicit without it ever feeling like, I don't know, an essay. I mean, he makes essay movies, but his New Wave films are still so propulsive um and still so visually driven while also having this like very clear political or like philosophical undertone to them.
I love your passion and for the topic, and I just love this film so much. It is so beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks for watching and enjoying it. I so appreciate you taking the time to watch.